Hello, I'm Terry Phillips, and with me in the KTEH studio is the 6th Doctor Who, Colin Baker. Welcome.
Hello, Terry. How are you? Before we even start,
Yes?
I have to correct you on one thing. I am not the 6th Doctor Who.
Oh.
I'm, in fact, the 6th Doctor. The name of the Doctor is The Doctor. The name of the program is Doctor Who.
Okay, well, I stand correct. I sit corrected.
That's all right. Bad start, Terry. You'd have to do better.
Let me then begin quite properly by asking you how you were selected as the 6th Doctor.
Right. Well, about 2 years ago, I took part in an episode of a story in Doctor Who called The Ark of Infinity when Peter Davison was playing the Doctor. And I played a character called Maxil, who was the Chief of Security on Calif, which, as you all know, is the home planet of the Time Lords, and the Doctor is a Time Lord. And it was quite interesting that in the character of Maxil, I had to shoot Peter Davison, and subsequently I then had to execute him. A lot of people have accused me of engineering his demise so that I could get the part. But what in fact happened is, as a result of playing the part in that story, I got to meet John Nathan Turner, who's the producer of the show, who I think was very properly appalled by the way I played the part. I tried to turn it from the Doctor Who into the Maxil show, which is, I think, the sign of any ambitious young actor. I like to call myself young, it amuses me. And subsequent to that, I went to a party, which was, the occasion was a wedding, when one of the production staff in the programme was getting married, and John was there. And he tells this story. I mean, it sounds a little vainglorious of me to pass it on, but I'm merely quoting him. He said that on that particular day, I must have been in good form, and I was being jolly and entertaining and outrageous, probably. And on the way home, he said to a friend that he was with, "I think I found my next Doctor." And when Peter said he was leaving shortly afterwards, John contacted me with a view to seeing if I'd be interested, and my goodness, I was interested. Yeah. We spent a few weeks discussing the way I would play the part if I was to be offered it, and then he was insane enough to offer it to me. Yeah. And now you'll have to prise me out of it with a crowbar, because it's mine.
Well, I understand that you're a Doctor Who fan from way back.
Yes, I wasn't a fan in the sense that I joined all the fan clubs and dressed up in the clothes and went around going boing, boing, I'm a Doctor Who fan. But I certainly watched it from the very first episode in November 1963 when it started. I remember all the William Hartnell stories and the Patrick Troughton ones. Subsequently, I spent a lot of time working myself because I was then an actor. So I didn't see that many of the John Pertwees or Tom Bakers. And then circumstances were such that I was free when the Peter Davison episodes were going out, so I saw a lot of those. It's a programme that I've always watched when I was able to, because it's, I believe, quite apart from my own contribution to it, it was a very, and is a very good programme. It's one that's captured the imagination of British viewers for many, many years. It's kind of an institution. It's been on for so long now that it would be a very strange BBC that didn't have Doctor Who on it.
Well, now, as we're taping this, you've only been playing the Doctor for less than a year.
No, more than a year.
Oh, more than.
I've been actively involved in the show for nearly 2 years now.
Oh, really?
That's because there was a gap between my taking over when Peter Davison left the show. I had one story immediately after, The Caves of Androzani, which was the story in which he left. Then I did The Twin Dilemma. Then we had 4 months, the annual layoff. Then we started again when I did a full season. And now I've had another 3 or 4 months nothing to do because, as you may have heard, there's been another kind of extended hiatus because of mainly financial restrictions at the BBC. Doctor Who has suffered at the hands of the temporary axe, and we're off the screen for a year. But we'll be back, invigorated.
Now, as we're recording this conversation, I don't believe you've been officially seen in the U.S., is that right?
That is quite true. I've been unofficially seen, I gather, and semi-officially at certain conventions I've been to where videos have been shown. But it does seem that most of the die-hard fans have managed somehow, some of them by going over to England to see it, to have seen some of my stories. And I've been very heartened by the response. They haven't been throwing things at me, they've, apart from the odd flower. No, they've been very nice, and I hope that they continue to enjoy the new Doctor.
Well, for those who have not or will have not yet seen you, what can they look forward to in the new Doctor Who?
Well, I can tell you the titles of the stories, if that's what you mean. I always hesitate to anticipate what others will see in my characterization by outlining it too much. You kind of restrict yourself, if you like, by definition. But what I certainly have been aiming for is a kind of echo of all the previous Doctors, because even though we are different aspects of the same personality, or different personalities of the same character, if you like, the underlying core of the Doctor remains the same. And even though those characterizations do sometimes vie with each other when they meet in stories like The Five Doctors or The Two Doctors, nonetheless it is the same person. So it's nice to have little kind of distant tinkles that remind you of, for instance, William Hartnell's irascibility, Patrick Troughton's zany kind of cosmic hobo Chaplin-esque quality, John Pertwee's gadgetry obsession and heroism, daring-do and all that, Tom Baker's wit, humour, Peter Davison's honesty, integrity, and whatever it is that I add, which I think is perhaps a little more abrasiveness. My Doctor can be dreadfully sarcastic sometimes, but basically all those other characteristics are there, plus the Doctor himself. And anyone who goes through time and space righting wrongs, which is basically what it's all about, it's, I feel like a latter-day King Arthur or Robin Hood. It has that kind of epic quality, which is nice.
It must be a wonderful character to play. I mean, a hero, an
yes.
intergalactic hero.
Yeah, I mean, it's the best thing you could possibly do. I was very surprised when it was announced that I was playing the part, that the number of very successful actors in Britain, I won't name them out of deference to their pride, if you like, but who on meeting me have said, "You are the luckiest actor in this country." And I said, "Why?" They said, "Because you're playing Doctor Who. We'd all love to play the Doctor." I said it myself, the Doctor, because you're playing the Doctor. We'd love to play it. And I said, "You really would? You know, tie yourself down for 3 years?" Yes, part like that. It's a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. And I believe that to be true as well.
Now, do you ever get together, or have you ever gotten together with John and Tom and Patrick and had a beer together and said, "Now, gee, how have we done, or how should we do this, that?"
I've met different Doctors in different situations. I met Peter when I worked with him, of course, in Arc of Infinity, and I've met him at conventions since, and socially as well. He actually didn't give me any advice, which I suppose was very proper of him. I would hesitate to give advice to my successor unless it was asked for. I've never met Tom. I'd like to meet Tom, because I'm sure he's a very interesting man, but he's very busy working at the National Theatre at the moment. I know Pat Troughton very well, because for a long time I shared a flat when I was a young actor with his son, who's also been in Doctor Who. And when his son got married, I was his best man, so Pat was there. And over the years I've known him rather well and have an enormous respect for him, certainly as an actor as well as a person, because I think he, of all of us in a sense, was the one who was most a character actor. The rest of us are drawn very heavily on our own personalities, but Pat is not, by any means of the imagination, a cosmic hobo. So he was really acting when he played the part. And he's a great man, great sense of humour. We've done a story together called The Two Doctors, which we filmed in Spain, which, alas, was originally intended to be filmed in America, but in New Orleans. But the co-production money fell through. But we did it in Spain because it was nearer, cheaper. And that was great to work with Pat after admiring him all these years and knowing him socially. John Pertwee I've met just at conventions. I thought, I kind of felt a kind of almost a fan thing myself about him, because John has such personality and charisma, but I found him very warm and friendly, and we shared a few beers together, if you like, and had a few chats. So there is a kind of camaraderie of Doctors. We ought to form a union, really. There's enough of us now. Well, alas, William Hartnell, as you probably know, is deceased, and I never had worked with him or met him, so that's somebody I will never meet. I did work with he had a replacement in the Five Doctors, and that's called Richard Hurnbull, who played William Hartnell, who played the First Doctor, if you like. But since then, he also has died, so I think the First Doctor is unlikely to be seen again. I mean, I don't know, they might change their minds, but...
Now, this is not your first international television experience, is it? You've been seen in, well, there was something called The Brothers that was seen outside the UK.
Yeah, that's true. The Brothers was never seen in America, but it was shown extensively in Europe and Australia and places like that. That was a long time ago. That was 1976. It finished. I was a much younger man. But the character I played was quite interesting because it was a kind, if you like, of J.R. prototype. I was
From Dallas.
Yeah, yeah. I was a ruthless banker who moved into a large trucking company and by hook or by crook took it over and turned it to my advantage. Unlike J.R., he was honest in as much as he stayed within the law, but apart from that was as dishonest as possible, but just never got caught, which I suppose in a sense makes him a cleverer version of J.R. And there was a time when I was actually voted by one of our national newspapers' readers as the most hated man in Britain, which I suppose is hardly an enviable epithet, but for an actor it's quite a compliment. Mm. It did mean that I got attacked in the street by old ladies with umbrellas who said, you know, "Don't you be horrible to Edward," who was the leading character in the show, and it had its good side. I went into a shop once when the owner of the shop presented me with a magnum of champagne, and I asked him what that was about. And he said, well, I was watching your programme one day, and I said, if that ... can do that, so can I. And I sold my house and invested the money in a shop, and I treated my staff appallingly, and I gave them low wages, and now I'm a millionaire, thank you very much.
Oh,
I thought that was a sort of backhanded compliment, really. Yeah. But that show, to answer your question, about 5 minutes later, was shown in places like Scandinavia, and Israel, Australia, and I travelled to those places much in the same way as I am travelling here to talk about Doctor Who.
Do you enjoy all the exposure and all the
Oh, it's wonderful. I mean, what other job do people do where they get that kind of feedback on what they do? I mean, it's such a luxury to do a job you enjoy doing, get all that job satisfaction, work with all those wonderful people, and at the end result, the person at the end of the chain, the person who pays for it, the viewer, feels warmly towards you. I mean, if you're making cornflakes, you don't get much thanks from the person who eats them in the morning. They don't ring you up and send you letters about it. Mm. Oh, it's great.
Now again, since we've, at least as we're taping this, we haven't seen any of your episodes here, it's difficult to ask about specific ones, but how has it been in filming the series? What kinds of experiences have you had in being part of that company?
It's been very good. I was quite surprised that I was able to feel comfortable doing it quite so quickly, because it has such a history behind it, and there are 5 very hard acts to follow. I don't know whether I'm simply insane, or I think perhaps the work schedule is so heavy you don't get time to think once you're doing it. And you are enormously helped by the fact that, as I was saying earlier, the kind of cult status the programme has acquired, not just with the viewers but with actors, means that you do get a very, very good support actors. Normally when you're casting a programme, you're resigned to the fact that you end up with 5th choice. You offer to one person, they're busy or they don't want to do it. But with Doctor Who, that's not the case. It's usually the person you ask first who says, "Oh, I'm free, wonderful, I'd love to do it." Mm. And people say to me, "Go on, get me into Doctor Who." Because they know it's a fun show, and they know that it appeals to people of all ages, and they're going to have a good time doing it, even though you have to go to freezing quarries in the middle of the winter and fall into mud and pretend it's some foreign planet and it's boiling hot. You know, that's one of the kind of quirks of the job.
What's the day like? What's the production day like?
Right, let's say we're doing a 25-minute episode. That basically has a weekly turnaround. So you would have a read-through of the script on a Wednesday, let's say. You'd rehearse it Thursday, Friday, Saturday, have Sunday off. Monday, the producer would come and watch you doing a dry run, not in the studio, in a rehearsal room. Would tell you how dreadful it is and how badly you're doing and why haven't you learnt the lines properly, and they change a few bits here and there, maybe if they're not working. And in the afternoon, all the technical crew come in, the camera boys and sound men. They watch you do the same thing so they can work out for the next day where their camera's going to be. Then the following day you go into the studio and you tape it. Usually it's done out of sequence, kind of set by set. So if you have a lot of scenes in the TARDIS with the companion, in my case Perry, you do all those scenes one after the other. Then you move to another set and do all those scenes. But if you've rehearsed it well over that week, then you have no problem kind of hanging that together. It's not as bad as film, where you can do adjacent scenes 6 months apart, and you've really got to remember. It's all compressed into a day, so it's not too bad.
So, in effect, you do the entire filming of the show in one day?
Oh, yeah. Hmm. I mean, sometimes they alter the schedule, so you do 2 episodes in a fortnight. So you have a fortnight to rehearse, or 10 days to rehearse 2 episodes, and then over 2 days they'll film 2 episodes. But basically, one 25-minute story, or episode of a story, represents 1 day in the studio.
Before I go any further, I'm about to ask you about your costume, but you're wearing these wonderful Argyle socks, and I don't know if you've had a chance to see these yet. I take it this is not part of the Doctor Who costume.
No, it isn't, but I think I kind of wore them subconsciously because I felt a bit subdued today. So I put on these multicoloured socks so that I felt that I had some kind of tenuous connection with my character. Fun, aren't they? Which camera's got them? Who wants to look at my socks? Come on, feel free. Perhaps your colour scanners can't cope with it.
What about the costume? How do you appear in the series?
Well, let's say it's the kind of costume you would expect to have been designed by a committee. We decided, after a lot of discussion about what kind of costume the sixth Doctor should wear, it was suggested by John Nathan Turner, the producer, that, I think perhaps as a result of knowing me, that he thought it should be a costume in the worst possible taste. I'll allow you to work that out for yourself. So it's got yellow trousers with a black stripe in, green spats, orange spats on green shoes, a jacket that's a mixture of tartan, red, orange, yellow, green. Oh, it's ghastly. But the joy is I'm inside it looking out, so it's everybody else's problem.
Again, recalling something from a conversation I had with Patrick Troughton, he was known to be and I guess still is known to be, a practical joker in his work. Have you had any experiences like that?
Well, yes, working with Patrick, which I did in The Two Doctors, which was a 6-episode story. We had about 8 weeks together doing that because we were also filming for it in Spain. And as well as Patrick in it was Fraser Hines, who played Jamie, who was Patrick's Scottish assistant way back in 1923, whenever it was they did it. And he also has a great sense of humour. And I've heard a lot of stories about the things they got up to when they were doing it then. So we attempted to out-jape each other. I'm afraid the directors occasionally get a little impatient when they're short on time and there are practical jokes going on. But poor old Pat in that story had to be confined to a wheelchair a lot of the time, having been drugged by the Sontarans. And that's a very unpleasant experience, being drugged by the Sontarans. And in rehearsal, we used to do things like, nice, simple things to poor old Pat, like distracting his attention while the other one crept up behind and tipped him out the wheelchair. We stopped doing that after a while because he hurt, But yes, there were others that I can't think offhand, but props that we sabotaged. And there was one that we all collaborated on at the end. The last scene we were shooting was a scene where we had to wake Perry up, who is my assistant, by throwing a cupful of water over her face. And we bribed all the technicians and the director with promise of great liquid refreshment afterwards, that once we got that in the can, if there was time, that they would say, "I'm sorry, we haven't got that, we have to do it again." And we filled a bath with water. And she had her eyes closed, lying on the table. And we went for the scene, and the two of us lifted up the bath and chucked the whole lot over her. And what a professional. She carried on acting the scene. Even though she knew that something was wrong, she carried and played the rest of the scene soaking wet, poor girl.
Hysterical.
She's vowed revenge. So I shall have to be careful.
I won't ask you to comment on your present work, but of former episodes that you've seen, do you have favorites, favorite monsters and favorite stories?
Yeah, out of my first season, I've got two favourites really, viewed from different points. My favourite to do was The Two Doctors, because of working with Pat and Fraser, and it was a great story written by Robert Holmes, who is one of the great story writers from way back from Doctor Who wrote a lot of everybody's favourite stories. But my favourite to watch, I think, because obviously watching them isn't quite the same as watching them when I saw it years ago, because I do know what's going to happen. But on the other hand, when you finally see it cut together and see all the scenes you weren't in and how they relate to the ones you were in, sometimes you're quite surprised. And there was a story called Vengeance on Varos in that season, which was a very unusual story. It had a kind of menace to it, which I found very good, and it was beautifully shot and written. And there was a monster in that called Syl, and it's a first-time monster who is so wonderfully repellent, kind of a talking shrimp, if you like, that everybody was really appalled by Syl. And he had a kind of comedic touch to him as well. He wasn't just thoroughly evil like Daleks and Cybermen who have no emotions. This was one who got very angry and cross and frustrated. That was nice. Also, I'm very fond of the Master, because I think all the great stories in literature of the adventure kind have a hero and a principal protagonist, like Holmes and Moriarty, that sort of thing. And I think the Master represents that in Doctor Who. And being human or humanoid, somehow they're easier to act with than some of the created monsters that fail to work or the mechanisms break down, and they can be quite tedious in the studio. At least there's a kind of direct confrontation with the Master. And a lady called the Rani, who is in The Mark of the Rani, which was in my first season, who's a kind of female version of the Master. We couldn't call her the Mistress, unfortunately, so she had to be called the Rani. But she also is a rather fun protagonist.
How do you account for the enormous popularity of this television series?
I suppose if I could really answer that question, I'd be Aaron Spelling, wouldn't I? I don't know. I think it's a combination of a lot of things. It started back in '63 at a time when there weren't any other science fiction shows. It even antedates Star Trek, which is extraordinary. It was the first of its kind in England. It captured the imagination of the British public very quickly. Because the kids could relate to it, the adults could relate to it. It's a time-honoured theme of good versus evil. It's a good adventure story. But it was investigating things that were newly happening in our lives. I mean, space was the new exciting thing, and this dealt with space, and there wasn't anything else that did. And I think it's been successful over here because it hasn't attempted to change from what it originally was. It's not competing with Star Wars or Battlestar Galactica or all those sort of high technology, expensive effects programs, which I think are wonderful. But that's not Doctor Who. Doctor Who is bits of string and sellotape and getting out of your situation by the seat of your pants, and it's got a kind of whimsy to it, which has been very popular. And now it's been on for so long that it's on top of all the things that are to do with merit. It's also like the Mousetrap in London, which has been on for years. It's now famous because it's been on for years. So the combination of all that makes me believe it'll be on when my children are grown up as well. I hope so.
Now, you said that they have taken a year break. Does that mean it's not being broadcast currently?
Quite correct. Unlike over here, where the programmes are shown over and over and over again, what happens in Britain is, alas, that they tend to show the show simply once, and then maybe a couple of years later they might repeat a selected story in a kind of season of 4 or 5 stories. But basically, the show is made to be shown only once. So that means my first season went out shortly after it was made, and that's it as far as viewing is concerned. So there is no Doctor Who being shown on the television at the moment, and won't be until the autumn of '86.
And what will you do in the interim?
Well, come over here, visit my friends in America, go to conventions. I mean, I've got work in the theatre to do in England, and my wife's just had a baby, so it's quite nice to be around to spend time with my wife and new daughter. I mean, I regard the BBC as being very enlightened. It's introduced paternity leave as a concept. So I've had a few months to actually spend with my daughter Lucy, which I've enjoyed very much.
Oh, nice. Now, from what I've heard, Doctor Who was designed, or at least seemed to be designed primarily for children in England, and yet here it's enormously popular among people of all ages. Has it caught on among adults in England?
Yes, it actually wasn't really. It's never been designated a children's programme. In fact, there are departments within the BBC that make programmes for different groups. There is children's television, there is series and serials, there's plays, and this has always been a series and serial show, i.e. it's general entertainment. The fact that it was scheduled to go out originally at 5:15 is what made people think it was a children's programme. But that's a kind of crossover time between daytime programming for children and evening programming for adults. So it's always appealed to family audiences, really. The parents have to be there to coax the children out from behind the sofa. It's a kind of tradition in Britain that if you talk to any kind of young adult, they will always say, I used to hide behind the sofa when the Daleks came on. And it comes quite spontaneously, so it must be true. I didn't myself, because I was quite elderly when it started. But everyone I know who was younger than myself hid. But yes, it sweeps across the board. I think the difference is that, as opposed to audience and fans, which are two different things in England, there's the 9 or 10 million who regularly watch the show, and there's the few thousand who are members of fan clubs and actively involved in the programme. And they tend to be teenage, young 20s. Those are the ones who are actively involved. Whereas the fans in this country tend to come from a very broad base indeed. Maybe the show goes out later here, I suppose. But from the smallest children to pensioners, basically. And that's nice. It's nice to know you're doing something which covers a huge spectrum.
Well, 100 years from now, after you've held the record for the longest-running doctor, and perhaps you've had enough of acting, what will you do when you have unlimited time and unlimited resources? How will you spend your time?
The idea of unlimited time, I'm sure, will come true. That's what happens when you finish doing a successful series in Britain. You have unlimited time, unlimited resources. How lovely, what a nice idea. I don't know, I'd actually like to work in America, so would every English actor. But having spent a small amount of time in California, I've decided it's about the only place I can think of in the world that I've visited so far that I would enjoy living in as an alternative to England. It really is a wonderful county. And I think Californians have the right attitude to life. I mean, I like all that, you know, laid back, let's enjoy ourselves. It's a beautiful state visually. It'd be nice to work over here. As to whether it would happen or not, I don't know. But maybe one day.
Well, you're certainly welcome to come back anytime. It's been a delight to talk with you.
I've enjoyed talking to you. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
An interview with Colin Baker, the kind of quality you've come to expect from Channel 54's commitment to science fiction programming, and why you turn to Channel 54 when you want the very best on television. Now it's your turn.